Greetings, I'm here with Jimmy, and we just got to check out the PlayStation 4 Pro. I think one of the big questions people have about the PlayStation 4 Pro is how it's doing 4K. And they kind of explained how that works. Do you mind kind of going into that just a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So, as you mentioned, one of the most popular questions is, can PS4 really do 4K? And the answer, as it turns out, is kind of complicated. So I think it's fair to say if it's like a simplistic looking game that, isn't too graphically demanding, then yes, it can do native 3840 by 2160p, which is what most people consider to be 4K. But most games will be using an upscaled 4K mode, which Sony calls checkerboard rendering, and I think about 2/3 of their launch games are gonna use that. And before I describe what that process is like, I hope you don't mind if I draw out, how 1080p and 4K is rendered.
Go for it.
So in a typical 1080p resolution, you have a pixel represented as, let's represent it as a square, and in the square there's a shader, and shader is basically like a color. You have one square with one shader. In the same space for a 4K monitor or 4K panel, you'll actually have 4 pixels, each with their own shader, so that's 4 times. With checkerboard rendering, what you're having is it actually, instead of pixels being represented in a square, they're actually represented in like a rectangle, and it occupies half the shader density as 4K, but it does it in like a crisscross checkerboard pattern. And apparently, according to Sony, doing so is an effective shortcut that will give you something that looks close to 4K without the performance impact.
Yeah, and I think what most people are probably curious about is, how does this look? Does it measure up to 4K? I mean, both you and I got to sort of do a blind test to see if we could tell the difference, and we did get it, but I mean, it was pretty hard to tell.
Right, yeah, towards the end of the presentation that we had with Mark Cerny, we both got to see sort of like a blind test case of 4K native 3840 by 2160 versus this checkerboard 4K. And I think we saw, what was the game again?
Days Gone.
Days Gone, right. And they had 2 4K TVs side by side. And I think we both were able to guess which one was the up-res version. I think I noticed, I looked at the back of his hat, the main character's hat, and I could tell like the linen stitching on the back of his hat wasn't quite as crisp. And I think you noticed that the colors didn't look as rich, because there's actually like half the color data. So that kind of makes sense. Having said that, though, it looks really close. How close would you say it looks?
I'd say it's like 98% there, and maybe 95. Because the only way I could tell a difference was when I did get up really close. Like I must have been within 6 inches of that screen, just trying to find little clues, basically.
Right. It is pretty impressive, and we also did see demos of the up-resed checkerboard rendering versus the native 1080p, and there was a pretty stark difference.
So I think the final question then would be, do you think it's worth upgrading to the PlayStation 4 Pro?
So we will be reviewing it when it comes out in November. Until then, I think my gut is saying, if you have a 4K/HDR TV and don't have a PlayStation 4 and are looking to get a game console, I think it's a very good buy. I think if you have a PS4 and are sitting on a 1080p TV, it doesn't make too much sense. I think that there are going to be some titles that will look better at 1080p, but I would probably hold off on upgrading until we get a better list of titles to support that.
Great. For more on the PlayStation 4 Pro, be sure to stay tuned to GameSpot, and we'll see you guys soon.